in 2020. And so some numbers. We have had 17 seminars. Today is our 18th one with 19 speakers, 58% of which were male and 42% were female. We are slightly above the 30% female that is the population of our field of research. So we're doing well, but it would be awesome to see 50-50. During those 17 seminars, we have had about 1,112 people connected. So thank you for being there. There were about 4 that actually complied with the time limits. It's very dangerous to give a microphone to a researcher and tell them that you have half an hour to speak. Most of them speak for an hour. So the ones that were the most reliable was Amaya, Melanie, Karen, and Ryan. I think that Ben did too, but I cannot really remember. I think Amaya, Melanie, and Karen demonstrate how good their time management is. And Ryan was just preparing for when he's hosting next year to be able of telling people to stop. And then of the seminars uploaded to YouTube.
I went well over.
Did you? Ah, okay. I had it wrong then. Okay.
Just a couple minutes.
So of the seminars uploaded to YouTube, Oscar Ferreiras has the most number of views with 115. But this is not normalized with the number of days since posted because I haven't had the time to do that. It's not that much my dedication. And we couldn't have done this without all of our speakers that I don't know why they're coming up one by one. And thank you to every one of them. And of course, we couldn't have done that without you. That is our audience. And thank you. Obrigado, gracias, arigato, and so on. So I will stop sharing now and give the floor to Mitch. Over to you, Mitch. You can tell us about CoastSnap.
Thanks, Anna. I'll just start sharing my screen. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Yep, good. Okay, thanks very much. Thanks everyone for giving me the opportunity to present on CoastSnap. I'm not going to sing. I was thinking about actually bringing my accordion and playing Jingle Bells as a special, but I don't have my accordion here, so maybe fortunately or unfortunately, you don't get to see that. But I will talk about CoastSnap. So, but first to begin, I'd just like to acknowledge that where I'm sitting right now, I'm sitting on the land of the Camaragal people of the Eora Nation. This is actually a photo I took, which is just literally 500 meters from where I'm sitting right now. And we actually have, where I'm here at the Water Research Laboratory in Manly Vale on the northern beaches of Sydney. And we actually have rock engravings right on our site, which is always a constant reminder of that we live on Aboriginal land, and it's really a source of inspiration for me. First of all, just a bit of a background about CoastSnap. CoastSnap was born in 2017 as a pilot project, and I'd like to particularly thank and acknowledge the New South Wales government, the planning industry and environment, in particular Mike Kinsella. We started having initial chats in early 2017 about, wouldn't it be great, let's just install a little post and see if we can actually get photos from the community and maybe we could get something useful out of it. Fortunately, they had a little seeding grant to put that idea into practice, and that's how CoastSnap began. So in 2017, I'd like to just acknowledge all the people you see on screen who are involved in that initial pilot project. 3 years later, it's kind of grown quite considerably, and it's a bit hard to keep up, even myself. So this is a map here of global CoastSnap locations worldwide, and I'm trying to keep up, but I think we're now in 16 countries worldwide on 6 continents, and over 100 CoastSnap stations around the world, and thousands of images collected and thousands of participants. So it's really exciting to see a project that we started from little humble beginnings in Sydney to grow into a worldwide network, and that growth seems to be ongoing. And I'm just going to talk about what that network entails today. So what is CoastSnap? Well, the idea of CoastSnap was basically everybody has a smartphone in their pocket, and actually your smartphone actually has a pretty good camera in it, and it's just as good a camera as what we've been using in things like coastal imaging technology for the past 3 decades. So we thought, well, wouldn't it be a great idea to harness all of these images that get uploaded every day to social media to actually try and do something interesting with regards to monitoring coastal changes. So see some images here. Maybe we could extract the shoreline, or maybe we could, from these GIFs, this is a bit more of a joke, but look at swash zone dynamics. So basically, it's a very, very simple idea, and I think that's why it's attracted a lot of interest, because of its simplicity and low cost. CoastSnap is basically entails just a stainless steel cradle, as you see on your screen here. And what it involves is we install these pieces of stainless steel at fixed locations overlooking a beach. But then basically with these stainless steel cradles, we invite the public to go and put their smartphone in and take a photo. So CoastSnap, the thing about it is the stainless steel cradle are carefully designed so that they control the position and the viewing angle at which the photo is taken. And to within a certain tolerance, accepting that there's quite a few variations with smartphone models and so forth. And we try to get these stainless steel cradles installed, particularly at elevated locations that look along the beach. So that's when you look at all our stations worldwide, most of them have that kind of orientation. Because basically the more elevation you have, the better accuracy you can attain. And then basically with the stainless steel cradles, what we are looking for is repeat photos over time from that same position. So we invite the public to take photos. And with these repeat photos, they're always the same photos. They're used to track changes on the coastline across multiple timescales. So we could get before and after photos from extreme storms, like actually what we're seeing here in Southeast Australia right now. And then over time, with these collection of images, we can start to look at changes over seasons, over years, and who knows if CoastSnap will be around for decades or so. We could start to look at changes with sea level rise and let these images really be an eyewitness to the tremendous changes that we're likely to see in the coming decades. And these are useful at multiple levels. Firstly, for public engagement. So reminding the public about our dynamic coastline, that coastlines do change and they can change quite dramatically. And sometimes the public forgets that. So time-lapse movies from all of these images are very useful. But we can also get, and this is what I guess separates CoastSnap from other photo point monitoring techniques. So we don't profess that this is the first type of photo point monitoring in citizen science. These kind of stands and cradles are used quite often, but we actually go a little step further and actually use some sophisticated photogrammetry techniques, which I'll talk about, to actually extract high resolution or high accuracy data from these images. And then finally, equally important, I think, is a way to break down barriers that we see quite often between the research that we do as coastal researchers and the public. Because as you see, look, the public is super interested in what we do researching the coastline, and this is a really good way to break down those barriers and involve the public in the data collection process. So even my mum is involved in taking snaps for us, so that's great. So this is just an example of one of our stations. This is at North Narrabeen Beach, and this is all the photos taken from that over an 8-month period. And you can just see from these community sourced images the tremendous changes that can happen. So this is at the entrance of a lagoon, and intermittently opening and closing lake and lagoon. And these have very interesting issues in terms of opening and closing. And with these images taken from the public, we can actually track these closures and opening. And you can see here that the council actually goes and opens this lagoon and lets the water out. So that's a very good example of just showing that from all these images, just to capture these changes entirely from free data sourced by the public. And then, as I was saying, what we can do is we can actually go a lot further than just these time-lapse movies. So So we actually use photogrammetry, which I'll go into. And on the left here, what you see is that same 8-month period, and you see from our photogrammetry techniques, the ability to extract time series of change at transects along the coast. Now, you can read more about it in the publication we published last year in Coastal Engineering, that you can see there, shoreline change mapping using crowdsourced smartphone images. And we did, over that pilot program, we did quite extensive testing of the accuracy. And what we found was that the accuracy is in the order of 2 to 4 meters. So when we consider what we saw, for instance, at this particular site, we saw changes in the order of 60 to 80 meters. So in Southeast Australia, we have a very dynamic coastline. So 2 to 4 meters, we're more than happy with, considering the low cost technique that we're using. So how does it work? So I'm just going to go just a little bit into coastal imaging 101. At the underpinning CoastSnap and most of coastal imaging is this equation here, which is basically the equation which converts image coordinates, which we call UV, into real world coordinates through a process called image rectification. And to do that, you just need to know this thing P here, which is known as the projection matrix. Now, normally the projection matrix has 11 unknowns. So the focal length of the camera, both in the X and Y direction, a thing called the skew parameter, the 2 principal points, which is basically where the light rays focus on the image sensor, and then some things about the actual location and orientation of the photo itself. So its azimuth, tilt and roll, and its positions in X, Y, and Z. Now, this is quite a bit of a challenge, more so in CoastSnap than our traditional coastal imaging, because this P matrix changes from camera to camera. So we're not dealing with a single camera taking photos constantly over time. We're dealing with cameras from the public that changes every single photo. But we simplify this technique by making a few assumptions, which are generally quite acceptable. So we assume that the focal length is pretty good and doesn't vary in X and Y. We assume the skew parameter is equal to 1, which is generally a pretty good assumption. We assume that it's got a perfect sensor and that the principal points fall right into the middle of the image sensor. And then because of our camera cradle, we actually know its position because it's fixed piece of stainless steel. We know that X, Y, and Z. So what we're basically left with is 4 unknowns. So the focal length of the camera and basically the angles of the camera image. So while they're kind of controlled by the cradle itself, even just a slight variation can completely throw out the accuracy. So we need to actually solve for those. Now, theoretically, we can actually solve for those just with 2 things called ground control points, which are basically ways of some points in the image where you know both the X, Y, Z coordinates and the UV coordinates. So ground control points basically look like this. This is our station at Manly. And you can see here we have a whole bunch of fixed points in the image that we go out and survey, and we know those coordinates, and we know what they look like on the UV in the image coordinate, and from that we can basically solve for the projection matrix in that equation previously. Now this is a nice and easy site. It's an urban area. There's lots of fixed structures and things, which is really good, really simple for our purposes. Unfortunately, fortunately that we have beaches that are not all urban and just don't have natural dunes, which obviously are very dynamic. We're able to overcome that. We do a kind of different type of technique. This is me doing a site survey. If you follow, you can see me basically wandering around with a GPS, wandering around the image and taking survey measurements. And through this process, we can effectively survey in the cameras to start tracking our coastline. So we try and get these ground control points spread across the image. And then what we have is we stitch this image together so you can see me about 9 times in the image. each with an XYZ location. And through that, we can solve the projection matrix. And then we also get that location of the cradle itself. And the good thing about this process is that it can, without even you telling us about the smartphone itself, we can actually estimate the model of your smartphone just by the GCPs and the geometry of your image. So this was during the pilot program, we could actually see that we're getting spikes in the number of photos coming from iPhone 5s and 6s were popular at the time, and iPhone 7s were starting to come in. So you can actually see these trends in the data that you're getting, which is quite cool. So that's the second step. Then the third step is basically what we primarily use the CoastSnap images for is for shoreline detection and looking at shoreline change. So this is quite a common technique in coastal imaging and has been looked at for, I guess, over 2 decades now. We did some testing, and we actually use a technique which we call the color channel divergence method. It basically says that, well, a lot of the water looks blue and a lot of the sand looks red, and we can use that information to basically find a dividing line between the sand and the water. And we do that by just looking at the peaks between the blue and the red. So the divergence between the red and the blue channels, and we can find that line itself. That technique actually works really well, at least on our coastline. We're probably able to pick a shoreline pretty automated, I would say about 90% of the time. That also helps that we have generally nice sunny and blue sky conditions. Then we take into account the elevation of the shoreline, and we do that by a simple shoreline elevation model. So we assume that the shoreline is constant along shore. So that's obviously not entirely correct, but that's an approximation. And so the shoreline is related to the tide level at the time. We actually just use the astronomical tide rather than the measured tide, because generally doesn't diverge too much, and astronomical is a lot easier because we don't have to rely on always getting real-time wave tide gauge data. And then we have a simple wave setup correction term from Stockton to take into account that the wave setup at the shoreline. Because they're instantaneous images, we don't actually resolve the wave run-up, which is a bit more tricky from just a single snapshot. But we can kind of resolve the wave setup at least. And so that was basically how CoastSnap works. So for the last 3 years, we've been operating in a way where we're sourcing it from different methods in all of our images. So we use Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Some sites have been using a QR code, or then we also have email as well, recognizing that not everybody has social media, and so they can send their email to do that. This approach is a little bit of a pain to manage, particularly when you're starting to grow and get hundreds of sites. So that's kind of our motivation towards moving towards an app-based solution, which I'll talk about. Just in terms of how much participation we get, basically with all citizen science, and CoastSnap's no different, the more effort you put in, the more effort you get out. So you can't just install a camera cradle station and expect the community to just take photos ad infinitum. It does require a two-way conversation between you and the public, but we've had quite a lot of success at quite a few sites on the southeast coastline. So we have these local champions, basically, where if you find some keen beans community who go about on their daily walk and take photos, you get a really successful site. So this is one site. This is at Blacksmiths Beach in just south of Newcastle. So we get over an image a day, and you can see over the 18 months or so it's been installed, it's constantly growing. So we haven't really had a drop off. and 91% are submitted there via email, which is interesting and just shows you that it's probably, I guess it's more the retirees that we get from that site. But that's not the same of all sites. This is actually our site at Byron Bay, which is located at Cape Byron, at the lighthouse there. It's very popular with Instagrammers, and you can see at this site, 65% of the photos are actually submitted from Instagram, which makes more sense. And because it's very reliant on tourists and things like that, you can actually see some interesting cessations in the trend and things. So for instance, during the bushfires and more recently COVID, with the tourist market downturn, those images have dropped off, and we're hoping to see them pick up again. But that's led us to our CoastSnap app. So the CoastSnap app, the vision ultimately is to have a seamless pipeline from the images that are taken from the app to real-time products and automated, and we're developing Python-based codes to try and get to that point. So this is our new app. So I should just point out, so our app is designed to basically remove those email submissions, which are a little bit of a one-way street, and in the past have actually involved myself or others actually replying and thanking people on a regular basis for their ongoing contributions, whereas the app is a lot more interactive. But we also want to maintain, for instance, the at Cape Byron, where we get so many Instagram traffic. So social media is also very good, and so still having that option of Instagram and Twitter. So the new CoastSnap app, which is available now from any app store, it was developed by a citizen science company named Spotteron, which is based in Vienna. They actually have a whole range of citizen science projects. So that was quite appealing for us because it meant that we're working as a whole group to maintain and always introduce new ideas and new products throughout citizen science, which is really nice. But also because it's a generic project, it's based on a generic template, so it has a few little quirks that we probably wouldn't have had if we had developed it from scratch. But I think the benefit of being as part of a wider group was obvious for us. The really good thing about the app is that CoastSnap images around the world can be viewed in real time. So it's a lot more engaging than our previous 3 years, I think. People can see all around the world all your images as they come in. We've designed it for international use by the CoastSnap community, so we've tried to use as much as possible generic terminology, and we're releasing it in 7 more languages as well. So all those sites around the world can use their own local languages. And it's also, which I think is also important, and actually quite a principle of citizen science as a whole, that it's a Creative Commons zero license. So the images are available for researchers or to the public. It's collected by the public and it should be for the public. One of the things with the app is actually gives you a lot more flexibility. So firstly, we have 3 now options for people to submit photos. Firstly is at our CoastSnap stations. So if you're using the app, make sure you select the CoastSnap station if you're putting it into one of our cradles. But then we've also opted to have the ability to have what we call a do-it-yourself station. So that the idea about that is to get people involved to actually monitor their local beach without actually having to rely on having a camera cradle nearby. So, and you can do that basically by finding a fixed post or anything else, maybe you have a tripod. We're also looking at having a CoastSnap kit for community groups, like a 3D printed portable mount, which we can send out to community groups and get them to monitor their local coastline over time. So that's the new do-it-yourself station, and that's been really successful since we released it. We've got a few people setting up their own station and taking photos every day, which is really great, and getting a lot more expansion. And then finally, a free roaming option, which is basically if you don't have a fence post or something nearby, we still welcome people to take photos, even if it's just for qualitative purposes, but that we still find them valuable. So we have that as well. One of the things, and I'd like to thank Mike Kinsella for suggesting this, is linking, so actually having some kind of social science aspects to the app. So trying to understand perceptions of coastal change. So when people take photos, they can give some sort of there's a set of options to ask, well, what do you think is causing the changes? And I think with the amount of sites and the global network that we now have, that will give some really interesting perspectives on how different cultural groups perceive changes to their coastline, whether it's based on human-induced changes, climate change, or natural induced changes as well. So that's something that we're really looking forward to. We also have a leaderboard. So we're trying to gamify it a bit so that they're competing against each other's. Participants can be community groups as well. So we could, again, you can log in as a community group and your community group could potentially take first prize. So we're looking at having prizes for CoastSnapper of the month or something. And one thing that's not a feature yet, but what would be could be interesting is having countries, get some country competitiveness going and regions and things like that. I'd just like to point out we also have a new CoastSnap website, which is still in development, but it is online. And I'd particularly like to thank a person in Florianopolis in Brazil by the name of Jose Mauricio, who actually saved the CoastSnap.com domain a few years ago. So we actually have that CoastSnap.com. See if I can click on that. So if you go to the website, one of the nice things about the website, if it loads, actually have a pretty, is you can actually go and see in real time the latest contributions. So for instance, we have so Narrabeen Beach and all around the world. So here we have both the southeast coastline and the coastline in Scotland. We're seeing storm changes right now as we speak all across the world, which I really like. So, and you can just click on that and go and view the images. So for instance, at the moment we're having large waves. This is at Stockton Beach, if it loads. And yeah, you can see the waves at the moment crashing at Stockton Beach. This is we have 3 sites along that erosion hotspot there. So that's a really nice feature. Let me go back to the. And so the app also has an API, which means allows us to automatically download images for all the locations using a specific code, and also takes control of the metadata. So the time, the user, the method, the perceptions, and things like that. Then we have Python scripts to manage all that data. And we're also developing now Python scripts to automate the generation of time-lapse movies as well, all through the app. And we're hoping to have those time-lapse movies available on the website so people can see changes in real time. The other thing I'd like to point out, and I'd like to welcome collaboration if anybody's interested, is I've actually been using CoastSnap quite a bit for honours projects. If you're interested, please contact me. But we have our CoastSnap MATLAB GUI, which is quite user-friendly, and it's all available on GitHub for people to monitor their own coastline and actually track changes. If you're interested, yeah, I'd be more than happy to collaborate. I think it could be an interesting option and a way of attracting more images to the app as well. On the right here, what we see is, so there's ways to go beyond instantaneous snapshots. This is if you don't have this and you have an iPhone, there's a great app called Image Average Pro, which actually can create time averaged images on the fly from your smartphone. And so you can see these bar features. And that's a feature we're looking to incorporate into the app in the near future to actually create time averaged images as well, and resolve bar features, rip channels, and things like that, and get more accurate shorelines as well. I'd just like to finally just point out, these are our new signs and poles. Special thanks again to Mike Kinsella and Kylie Woodbury from National Parks in New South Wales. We're actually rolling out quite a lot around national parks in New South Wales. This was quite a dramatic installation a few weeks ago, installed by helicopter. We also had an echidna looking on. And so these poles are being rolled out across New South Wales, so people can get, given that most of our coastline is actually national parks, so we can actually use these poles to track changes. And these are what our signs, basically new signs, are looking like. So it's a fully integrated totem. The left is what the national parks ones look like. And basically it has the information on the left about how to take your photo. A good thing about the app now is actually you can scan a QR code to actually see the latest results from as you walk past the post, which is really nice. And we also have some information on our signs as well, about just giving some general background to dynamic coastlines, because we actually found that if you have that information, people get it a lot more, and it actually improves a lot of participation as well. So I think I'll leave it there. I hope, Anna, in the time limit. And if anyone has any questions, yeah, please let me know.